Welcome back. Grammatical consciousness raising instruction tries to answer the questions we posed earlier by striking a balance between form and function. What makes grammatical consciousness raising instruction, or what we will refer to as GCR, different from traditional grammatical instruction? First, there is much greater emphasis on form and function relationships, not on form alone. Second, it teaches grammatical structures in a broader discoursal context and not in isolation. Third, it takes an organic rather than a linear view of learning. This means that language learning is characterized by backsliding, leaps in competence, interaction between grammatical elements, and other complex processes. It is not a linear process of learning discrete structures, starting from words, phrases, clauses, to sentences, and then the text, and then accumulating them for mastery. Fourth, classroom activities are basically inductive rather than deductive. The activities are meant to facilitate the learning process by providing data through which learners may form and test hypotheses. What are the characteristics of GCR activities? What makes them different from traditional grammar exercises? Actually, GCR activities may resemble the traditional ones, and effective teachers may recognize them as what they may have been doing for years. You will probably say, "I've been doing that." But if you have, then you have been using consciousness-raising activities. GCR activities have the following characteristics. 1. They are derived from genuine interactions and authentic texts. 2. The context from which they have been taken is basically communicative in nature. And 3. The exercises recycle language points over several units of work so learners could reformulate their understanding of the structure. And finally, they encourage learners to inductively form hypotheses about the grammar structure. Grammatical consciousness-raising instruction can be realized in many different ways. There are also many creative techniques for raising our students' awareness of grammatical principles within a communicative context. This episode aims to show you these ways and techniques. It would be wrong to think that we, as teachers, are faced with only two choices: avoid teaching grammar by going communicative all the way, or returning to the purely traditional form-focused approach of language teaching. Clearly, there are many ways of teaching grammar which focus both on form and function. Let's watch a classroom lesson and see how this is done. All demonstration lessons are aimed at teaching direct and indirect or reported speech. Hopefully, at the end of this episode, you should be able to provide your classes with grammatical consciousness-raising exercises that will help your students learn any structure of the English language.
Good morning, class.
Good morning, Miss Cuba.
Okay, today we're going to learn how to report what others have said fluently and accurately. There are two ways of doing that. One, we can directly quote what others have said. For example, Brian, can you please tell the class what I have just said?
Ma'am said, today we're going to learn how to report what others have said fluently and accurately. She also said we can do this in two ways. One, we can directly quote what the other person has said, like what I'm doing now.
That's right. You see, if you have a perfect memory, doing that is okay, and it's quite easy. But if you don't have, you have to somewhat paraphrase or restate what others have said, and that's called indirect speech or reported speech. Now, where do you often hear or see this kind of sentences or speech?
Ma'am, in newspapers.
Exactly. You see, by their very nature, newspapers or news reports have to use this kind of speech. Now, I have here slips of news clipping reports, and just get one and pass. And I want you to see, please read them silently and see if they're of directed speech or reported speech. I'll give you time to read them silently. But before that, how would you know if it's direct speech? Portia?
There are quotation marks, ma'am.
That's correct. Now, what about reported speech? Yes, Albert.
Reported. We don't use quotation marks when reporting reported speech.
You're right. That's a correct guess. Later on, we're going to see other ways of using this kind of speech. But for now, are you ready to go on? First one. Who wants to start? Walter, can you please read your headline?
Okay. It says, no intact bodies, just pieces of flesh.
Please write your answer on the board and try to write it in the appropriate column. Okay, thank you, Walter. How about you, Martin? What's your headline?
There's enough water for Metro, says task force.
Okay, can you please do the same?
As you can see, newspapers are a very rich source of authentic texts that use direct and indirect speech. The context is communicative in nature, since reporting news is the natural context for which direct and indirect speech are produced, with the reader as its logical audience. The activity that you saw, being the first one in the lesson, is not sufficient for the students to be able to form their hypothesis about direct and indirect speech. Thus, the teacher needs to recycle the same structures over several activities so that the students could inductively form their hypothesis. Before we go back to the classroom to see how a teacher recycles structures, let's pause for a few reminders.